Welcome to the Salesforce Admin's Classroom. My name is Bill Ward, and I'm going to talk to you today about the topic of Salesforce object relationships. Now, as platform administrators, your understanding across the whole platform to a really good depth goes without saying, but there are certain topics where you really have to have a higher level of understanding because they are so fundamental and pivotal to how the platform works. And the data model and the relationship between objects is exactly one of those topics. So this supplementary lesson is going to cover this in some depth. Let's get started. The presentation will cover 4 topics: relationship cardinality, relationship types and their rules and behaviors, standard object exceptions, and finally, a summary of facts and comparisons. So, relationship cardinality, what is it? It's a strange term and we don't hear it bandied around very often, but I bring it to your attention just because it forms a baseline from which we can build the rest of the presentation on. Relationship cardinality is merely a concept that implies a connection exists between 2 or more things. So, for example, the connection between records on one object and records on another object. It simply answers how many records exist on each side of the relationship. The behaviors, however, of the various cardinal relationships are separate, and we'll explore them in detail. The first type is a one-to-one relationship, and this is very rare. The one-to-one relationship is where a single record on one object may only be related to the single record on another object, and Salesforce doesn't have a native one-to-one relationship. There are few, if any, genuine cases. One that comes to mind is that you could have an individual who has a passport and the passport number. So the passport number is associated with one individual is associated with only that passport number. It's a rather contrived example. The mainstay of cardinality is the one-to-many relationship, and these exist all over the place in Salesforce and databases generally. This is where one record, where it's on what we would call the parent side, can be related to multiple records on the child side. And examples, typically the account object, which sits right at the top of the hierarchy on the platform, has relationships with contacts, opportunities, and cases. For example, you have a situation where one account can be related to many contacts, one account can be related to many opportunities, one account to many cases, but those contacts, opportunities, and cases are related to only one account. They have one parent. There are, of course, exceptions to this, but let's just keep to the standard examples. So if we show a screenshot of an account, we can see the relationships that exist. And this account here, United Oil and Gas, in its related area, there are 4 contacts. There are at least 6 opportunities. So if we scroll down on the related page, the cases and the opportunities are coming into more detail. This account has these child relationships on these other objects. Showing relationships inside Salesforce between objects can be done very nicely indeed on the Schema Builder tool. And the Schema Builder tool is inside the Object Manager. You will find a button there and you can launch it. And then you can, with tick boxes, select individual objects that you wish to concentrate on and understand the relationship between them. In this example, I selected the account object and then the related contacts and case objects. The connections that you see are shown clearly, and the symbology also reveals the one-to-many aspect. The account with its relationship to case is shown here, and the termination on the case side has this thing called a crow's foot. It's a circle with 3 lines coming out in a fan shape. Its purpose is to indicate that the account might have many case records connected to it, but each case will only be connected to one account. Inside the box you can see the list of fields and what data type they are. So there is account currency, a pick list, a text field down here. And you can see what the lookup relationship is. Now we're going to talk about lookup relationships, what types they are, because there are two key types. But this one is showing a lookup to the account where the account name, this field here, is also displayed down here. And the same over on the contact side. The account name is the account name that would be inside this record here. The next type of relationship which we encounter is a many-to-many relationship, where the records on each object can be related to multiple records on the other object. To make that happen, however, you do need, from a technical point of view, a junction object, something that's called a junction object, to sit in between to affect the many-to-many connection. And a standard example of this is leads. The leads object can have a many-to-many relationship with campaigns, but it has a junction object that sits in the middle that connects the two, which is called the campaign member. A campaign could be related to many leads, and a lead could be related to many campaigns. If we drill into the campaign tab, and then we pull up a campaign, the International Electrical Engineers Association trade show, I bet that's a fun event. This is the campaign, the event that the company has attended with a view to marketing and bringing in leads. And the leads that were gathered, amongst others, are down here. This one, Betty Bear, she works for some particular company that also attended the trade show. So from this campaign, many leads were gathered that are highlighted here in the campaign members area. And then if we turn this on its head, and then we look at the leads, and we examine Betty Bear's record, we can see that she is connected, and we see that she is related to many campaigns. The one that we were looking at a second ago was the trade show, but she's also attended a user conference and a product webinar. So Betty Bear is a member of several campaigns. If we focus on the relationship in Schema Builder, then we can see the lead object on the left, the campaign object on the right, and the junction object that sits in the middle. The lead has a one-to-many to the campaign member, and the campaign has a one-to-many to the campaign member, and the connection between the three facilitates this many-to-many relationship. So we've covered the cardinality, which is simply explaining the number of records on one side of the relationship as opposed to the other. So we have one-to-many and many-to-many as the key ones. But whether it's one-to-many or many-to-many, that tells us nothing about the rules and behaviors. The rules and behaviors are derived from two particular relationship types, lookup and master detail. And understanding how both of these work in depth is most important for a Salesforce admin. Let's talk about the lookup relationship. The lookup relationship is a loose one, and the best way to think about it is that if you are on a record on a particular object that has a lookup relationship to another, then consider yourself to be looking up to the parent. It's a loose relationship. The records remain independent of each other in terms of ownership security. The child record has its own owner. The parent record may be optional or required. You could have a child record that actually you haven't got around to giving it a parent in the first place. It's just available if you wish to. There is no cascade delete. A cascade delete is where if you delete the parent record, the child records also get deleted. The sharing model is independent. The child record doesn't have to follow that same sharing mechanism. Between lookup relationships, you can't have roll-up summary fields. And lookups can be created from custom to custom objects, custom to standard, and standard to custom objects in certain cases. There are legions of standard lookup relationships around. We've already talked about opportunities looking up to the account, cases looking up to the contact. We could create a couple of custom examples where we have an object for invoices where the invoice record looks to the related account. When you create a relationship, you need to consider whether you wish to make it lookup or master detail. Now, we haven't talked about master detail. We're coming to that. The lookup relationship is appropriate when child records must survive parent deletion, ownership needs to be independent, and the relationship is for reference only. Let's talk about master detail relationships. These are a very different beast. They're more tightly coupled, and this tight relationship means that the parent record fully controls the detail record, which is the child. So now we are going to talk about which record is the master. The master is the parent, and the detail is the child. The child record has no owner. And if you were to investigate or examine a record that is on the detail side, you won't find an owner field on there. It doesn't exist. Security, in terms of sharing, is inherited from the master. The parent is always required. Cascade delete is enforced. Parent record deleted. Any associated child records on the detail side are also taken away. We are allowed roll-up summary fields on the master. Now, we're going to talk about what a roll-up summary field actually is later. Only custom objects can be on the detail side of a user-defined master detail relationship. A custom master and standard detail is not allowed. Custom object examples: you could build an object for expenses and then another object for expense line items, which are the finer details of what an expense claim might be that would highlight all the receipts. And you would have that in a master detail relationship. If you had an object for employees to record their time off requests and the amount of time off over a year in their annual vacation allowance, you could have two objects, time off and time off request, in a master detail relationship to make this work. This is an example of an HR app that has been built, and they're all custom objects. 6 of them. These 4 objects over on the right hand side are in master detail relationships. The expense and the expense item, that is the master, and the expense item is the detail. The time off object is the master, and the detail is the time off request. So the relationship is left to right in each case with the detail, and in here you have the master objects. Bear in mind that the cardinality in these objects is one to many. One expense claim can have many expense items. One time off record can have multiple time off requests. Be aware that Salesforce does have some standard objects where you can find master detail relationships. Example, the quote object and the quote line item, the service contract object, and the contract line item. The behaviors: no owner field on the line item. The line item is a detail record in a master detail relationship to the parent. Sharing is inherited. Cascade delete is enforced. We can see it here in Schema Builder. The master is the quote. Note that there are roll-up summaries on the master side, and here on the detail side, there is the field that affects the master detail relationship to the quote, which is the quote name. With our decision process, if we are creating a relationship, should it be master detail or should it be lookup? When is master detail appropriate? It's when the child record's purpose is entirely to support the parent record. In other words, its existence would have no meaning if the parent record didn't exist. You have to ask yourself, if I deleted the parent, I have all these orphans, what would keeping that data do for me? If you need a roll-up summary on the parent side, well then that's the end of the discussion. It has to be master detail because you can't put those in place between records where it's a lookup. Let's talk about roll-up summary fields. Roll-up summary fields are a very powerful tool on Salesforce, and understanding how they work is key. They can only be created where the relationship is already set to master detail, and the roll-up summary is put on the parent record, and what it does is that it looks down across the children and it will aggregate up data into the field. Key characteristics of roll-up summary fields: the data is rolled up, in other words aggregated, from the children up to the master. The aggregation can take the form of summing, counting, evaluating the maximum in a range of numbers or the minimum in a range of numbers of the children. Note that there isn't an average function. Roll-up summary fields are recalculated automatically. So for example, if a new child record is created that introduces new relevant data, then of course we would want the roll-up summary to change accordingly. So they're primarily going to be seen on custom-to-custom object relationships that are obviously master detail. By exception, some standard object to standard object roll-up summaries may be created. A classic example is the account and the opportunity object. The custom objects, time off and time off request. The business is really interested to have the total holiday days used in constant display on records of employees on the time off object. So as the year progresses in which you have an entitlement, you're adding constantly requests for time off, and each request for time off will be a number of days. So do you want to have to jump from the time off object over to the time off request object and then scan across all those child records with a pencil and paper and add up how much each request was? Or would you rather be able to just see it instantly up to the second updated on the time off object? Well, I know which I'd rather do, and that's what we can do. So if we take, for example, this time off object here, the master, we can have a field on here called total holiday days used. It's a roll-up summary field, and when we created it, we selected specifically that we wanted roll-up summary. As we did so, we said, okay, we'll have automatic calculation, and the master is the time off. The summarized object is the time off request. We selected sum, and then it allows you to select what fields you want to aggregate. So the aggregation is across total days off requested for each request. All these individual days off requested are being summed up on the master side. However, we also have the ability to filter what is being summed or aggregated, because do you want all records or do you want some of the records depending on criteria? Well, in this case, we've elected to include certain criteria. So rather than going for all records, we said because this field is total holiday days used, we've put in the request type equals holiday, because when you create your request, you have to state, is this for holiday, or are you asking for compassionate leave maybe, or paternity or maternity? So in those instances, if the request type is not holiday, it doesn't get counted. We're only counting holiday. And then we have one additional criteria, the status of that is approved. Because if we made requests where it hadn't been approved, and therefore we couldn't take the time off, you don't want that rolling up and then being displayed as part of the total holiday days. So you can see it performs a really useful piece of data analysis for us. Because you might get asked about it in the exam, I want to cover the hierarchical relationship. There is another type of relationship in Salesforce that exists on the user object only, called the hierarchical relationship. And this is where inside the object itself, there is a relationship between one record and another, but we are staying on the same object. The key characteristics are that the manager field can link a user to their direct supervisor through the manager ID field. It models the organization chart of the company, and please be aware this is not the same as the role hierarchy that is used in sharing. Role hierarchies and the role that you have on your user record is all to do with record visibility of records that you don't own. This is nothing to do with that. This is the relationship to your manager or supervisor, and its purpose is to be used in a different part of the functionality of the platform. In my outline, I said that we would talk about standard object exceptions, and these are where you can encounter master detail-like behaviors, but they're not really a master detail relationship. The example that I'm going to pinpoint is the account and the opportunity, and the fact that you can have a custom roll-up summary field created on there. On the account object, you can put in place a roll-up summary field that could aggregate up all of the amounts across the opportunities. So some other, shall we say, specialities are with the account's relationship to the contact, opportunities, and the case. They're lookup, but deletion of an account will cascade delete all related contacts, or primary contacts. They will cascade delete related opportunities that are not closed won, unless you reparent them. And account deletion is blocked if any related cases exists. So if you do want to get that account deleted, you need to either delete the cases or reparent the cases first. Let's have a look at how the roll-up on the account object down to the opportunity object works. So if we have a look at this United Oil and Gas opportunities, there's 11 of them, and they're at various stages of the sales path. For the purpose of the demonstration, some roll-up summaries were put in place. These are custom fields, rolling up the total opportunity value, adding up the number of won opportunities, and a subset of this total opportunity value here, the total value of closed won opportunities being this number here, 1.98 million. This statement is pointing out the fact that if you have a many-to-many relationship between two objects, you have a junction object in the middle, which has a relationship between its neighbor on the right and its neighbor on the left. They are master detail, so on the junction object itself, those are the two master detail slots already used. You cannot, on that junction object, create a third master detail relationship anywhere. Finally, if you wanted to convert a lookup field to a master detail, then that means that all the records have to have a parent. And finally, it's important to understand that the cardinality, as in, is it one-to-many or many-to-many, is it hierarchical, is a separate concept from these relationship types of lookup and master detail. This last slide, which I'm not going to read out, is a full summary of the differences between lookup and master detail, and it provides a good basis for exam revision. I hope you found the presentation useful,